get started, right? The clock says it's time to start, so we'll start. I want to welcome you this morning. My name is Ron Martoy. Those of you that I haven't got, those of you I haven't gotten to meet or don't know who I am the transition interim guy up until June 9th. And at that stage in the game, we've got new things that are going to be going on here at Master's Way. So I want to orient you to where we are in a series right now called From Text to Hypertext, Reconsidering Church in a Google Culture. And for the last couple weeks, we have been talking about our story and how we start to search and mine and understand our story. And today, we're going to talk about the three fundamental core yearnings in the human heart. And not only so we can get in touch with our own, but fundamentally so that we can think about what does this mean to how we share our faith with people that are around us and start to listen for those core yearnings inside of them. So let's pray, and then we'll go ahead and begin. Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for the day that you've given to us. It's a day you've made, and we are going to be glad and rejoice in it. Thank you for what you're doing in us as we reconsider and think about what it means to be church in the 21st century. That it's a challenge for us to get off autopilot. It's a challenge for us to engage a culture that's shifting and changing. And that requires on our parts, in many cases, the needs for us to make shifts and make changes in the way we communicate, in the way we present the gospel, in the way we help people connect to you through Jesus. So thank you for our time together this morning. Teach us and be honored in our praise today, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. Mountains that have faced, stronger than the power of my faith. You're the constant in the trials and the change. It's what remains. It's what remains.
We can.
I'll get tomorrow's photo, sorry.
I confess my hope
We've been talking about this shift into our Google world, that this is a world where in Gutenberg, texts provided answers. In the Google world, people enter questions into the search engine. In the Gutenberg world, it's about amassing mounds of evidence and proof. And you take a look at our modern apologetics in the church, and we would give arguments and mounds of evidence for why God exists, why the resurrection we know happened, all these sorts of things. But in the Google world, nobody really cares that much about evidence. Truth is privatized. Truth is very relational. So it puts the church in a very interesting dynamic, a very interesting situation, an interesting place to inhabit, because we've got to figure out how do we communicate in a Google culture when largely what we've been tooled with has worked in a Gutenberg modern world, but not so much in the Google postmodern world. And what does that mean? What does that look like? What does it look like for us to begin to mine what is really going on deep down in our hearts, but also deep down in the hearts of people that we know that are maybe really very far from God? And so I want to help us think out loud about this. I've spent some time the last several years reflecting on this and actually made it the topic of one of the books that I wrote, because I think this is such a hot and important topic that we need to get a grip on. So let me ask you this question. What is it that actually gets you up in the morning? And my computer's frozen. Quite literally frozen. right, so let me ask you a question. What gets you up in the morning? Let's think for a moment as we consider all the things that happen day to day for us as we migrate and move in and out of our days. What is it that actually motivates us day in and day out to do what it is that we do? For some of us, it might be the job that we have because we want to take care of our family. It might be the fact that we've got caretaking that we're doing with the kids that we have. It could be that we're taking care of some aging parents. It could be a host of things. It could be that we're really deep down inside, we want to make some more money and have the next toy. It could be a dozen things. But I want you to begin to think about what is it that actually motivates you deep down inside. Because the fact of the matter is we all have a story. And that story that you and I have is something that moves us and motivates us day in and day out. All stories have narrative tension. That's what makes the story interesting, right? If you don't get the storyline at the beginning of the story or at the beginning of the movie or at the beginning of the first chapter or so of the book, you kind of go, you know what, it hasn't hooked me. There's no tension. There's no narrative storyline. There's nothing that's kind of drawing me in. And as a result, there's nothing that's really motivating me to go any further, to go any deeper in. And so just hit the pause button a minute and reflect. What is the narrative tension in your life? I mean, if you're a parent, probably it has a lot to do with kids or a lot about providing for that family. If it isn't about that, it might be about acquisition. It might be about power. It might be about a dozen things. But I want you to start to get in touch with this because this is the passage of reflection this morning. Ecclesiastes 3:11. Solomon says that God has set eternity in the hearts of humanity. God has set eternity in the hearts of humanity. This last song that Zeb led us in, the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There is an eternity set in your heart, in my heart. And I want us to reflect on that today. There's an eternity in our hearts. And I want us to ask the question, what's the shape of that eternity? What does that mean, that God has set eternity in your heart and my heart? And I think this is really what I'm even more interested in today. What does it mean that those far from God, who don't know God yet from an apple, actually have eternity in their hearts, which encapsulates some sort of yearning, some sort of core, some sort of drive, some sort of motivation, something that I think, again, this is where I think we want to head this morning. How do we begin to acknowledge that deep down in every human heart, there are the same basic longings? Truth be told, the guys that I work out with at the gym, the neighbors that I have barbecues with, the people that I see out biking in my development, none of them are persuaded by a mound of evidence that God exists and you ought to serve Him. None of them care. Evidence does not win the day today. That's a Gutenberg function. But you know what I know? Every single one of those people, far from God, have some very, very deep yearnings and some very, very deep assumptions deep down inside of themselves that are common to you and me and our next neighbor. And so this morning what I want us to do is I want us to try to get in touch with what does it mean for you and I to think about what Solomon means when he says God has set eternity in the hearts of humanity. We've spent some time talking about the shape of our story last week and what it means for us to consider how our stories get shaped. But since all of our stories hold tension, goals or problems or challenges, I want us to consider the traditional place that the story has begun for the church. The traditional place that we have brokered to our friends in our modern world, we've brokered to our neighbors, we've brokered to the people that we work out with, the people that we know that are far from God. The traditional place the church has started this story is, you're broken, you've offended a holy God, you're distant from God, and that's why Jesus came to earth. That's been the dominant storyline we've engaged. Now, what's fascinating about that is that, of course, creates some narrative tension for us as Christians. We take a look at that and we say, here's the storyline. I'm going to help my lost friends, put that in air quotes, my lost friends, feel some tension. Hey, you're going to hell. Right? That's been the storyline. Question, how many lost people you know that have heard that message are compelled by, oh, I'm going to hell, I'm scared to death? We're all, look at all the heads. Nobody of them. No, none of them. Exactly. Exactly. Robert Wuthnow, researcher at Princeton University, says something very fascinating. In the generation before mine, my parents' generation, 70 and up, 65 and up, they grew up in a culture of obligation. Obligation to the man. We're going to work in the same corporation, hopefully the whole career that we're in. We're going to do it for 35 years. We're going to engage the deal. We're going to take our pension. We're going to retire. We're obligated to serve the man. We get up, I already told you, my background, Italian, Catholic, and Presbyterian. We got up every single Sunday morning and went to both services. Hell for a teenager. Right? Why did we do that? Because that's what you did. You got up to go to church. That was your obligation. And you know what? We didn't meet Jesus in any of it. My parents never pretended to be Jesus followers. You know, they did the obligatory, we go to church every Sunday and we put a check in the collection plate. They did it every single Sunday. Why do you do it? That's your obligation. That's what you do. Right? We would drive through a town where an aunt or an uncle left, and I can remember my mom and dad on a number of occasions say, you know, we ought to really stop by and see them. We don't really want to, but you know what? Family obligation. Am I right? Now here's what's fascinating. In a culture of obligation, if you don't fulfill the obligations, what are the feelings of not fulfilling the obligations? Guilt. And in a culture of unfulfilled obligations where guilt is the feeling, a gospel that alleviates your guilt wins. Are you with me? But here's the challenge. You know what Robert Wuthnow said? Is that generation, typically called the older baby boomers or builders, that generation, I'm right on the cusp of baby boomers. I'm 50. That's baby boomer. Top end. Those baby boomers and builders, this is what is interesting. Robert Wuthnow says, we in our Google culture have moved from a culture of obligation to a culture of options. Options. Now let me ask you something. Do you know anybody walking around with a tremendous load of guilt because they've gone ahead and just tried and sampled the options available to them? I don't. I don't know anybody guilty because they're experimenting with drugs. They don't feel guilty about that. I don't know anybody that is sleeping around that feels guilty about that. It's very much a Google culture function. But you know what's very interesting? An awful lot of people I know, though they don't feel guilt because they've been through 2 or 3 marriages or have a child out of wedlock or have been in drug and alcohol rehab or have gone through some really hard knocks in life, their dominant feeling isn't guilty. Just go do some of the reading and research, and I think you already know this. What's the dominant feeling, you think, for those people? Empty. Empty. What else? What's that? Pain. What else? Anger. Definitely. What else? Depression. Rejection. What else? Disconnected.
I think they feel guilty about it.
Think so. Okay. What we know from the research is that the dominant feeling that people have in this era, in this culture, because of the things we're mentioning, is shame. Shame. Brokenness, disconnectedness, the things we're mentioning. But shame. And shame is a very, very different emotional dynamic than guilt. Guilt has to do with the feeling I've broken a law. That is not the dominant feeling of this generation, this era. I've broken a law. Oh, I feel ashamed that I didn't live up to mommy and daddy's expectation, but not guilty about it. Shamed. I feel ashamed that I have a child out of wedlock. I feel pretty broken that I can't get my addiction under control. And in a world where shame and brokenness are the dominant experiences, what that leaves us with in the church that basically beats people over the head to say, hey, you're going to hell, is, you know what? I'm already living in my own personal hell. I'm not too worried about eternity right now. Are you tracking with me? So we continue to broker a gospel that worked in a modern world. And does that mean that they still have broken the law and that they're guilty? Oh, of course, of course. We're talking about how they experience life, though. Is that in God's economy, or is there still an infraction of the law and all that? Sure, that's fine. But if the gospel we continue to present is a gospel of guilt alleviation and nobody feels guilt, we're preaching to nobody. Right? We're preaching to nobody. So the question has to become, did Jesus come to die for people only that know they broke a law, or people that are shamed, in pain, feel broken, wrestle with their addictions? Because as you go through the Gospels and read who Jesus interacted with, it's not dominantly with people that felt guilty, interestingly. It was dominantly people that were broken, that were hurting, that were disconnected, dominantly. I think the challenge is that people outside the church don't feel this tension that we are going ahead and trying to bring up, and as a result of that, they have opted to create narrative tension in their lives by pursuing goals that have basically been grafted into their lives via the American dream. I need to pursue a better job, a little more money, the next car upgrade. I need to pursue these sorts of things because these are the things that move the engine of my life down the road. Or I'm trying to make sure my IRA and my portfolio is adjusted properly so that I can finally retire someday. That's sort of the goal. Of course, then once you retire, you go, but what's the goal now? And you say, well, it's to play golf. And then you play golf like 5 days a week for 4 or 5 weeks, and you go, geez, golf's not that fun. Then what? Right? I mean, isn't that right? It's a narrative tension we're trying to sort out, but we can't quite figure out what exactly is it that we need to do. Listen to what one of the most well-known sociologists of our time says, Zygmunt Bauman. Brilliant piece. If you haven't read any of his stuff, you really should read Bauman on liquid modernity, liquid times, liquid life. Listen to what he says. The collapse of long-term thinking, planning, and acting leads our individual lives being spliced together into a series of short-term projects and episodes which in principle could be infinite. Now I want you to think about this. In the culture of obligation, my dad was going to get a job, be on a job trajectory, and 32 years later retire and take his pension. And that's what my dad did. Retired at 55, retired a little early, did his thing. But you know what? The current group graduating from college right now, this May and June. Do you know what our sociologists are telling us and what the demography is telling us? Right now, only 34% of all the kids that graduate will actually go get a job in their area of degree. Parents, how bad are you hating that? Huh? We also know that the average person graduating today in the course of their lifetime will have between 9 and 12 different jobs. Not my dad, not your dad. 9 to 12 different jobs, potentially in 4 to 6 different careers entirely. Graphics design, now I'm going to maybe do computer stuff. Now, you know what, I think, I've really always wanted to be a social worker. Go back to school and get a social work degree, right? This is standard now. The collapse of long-term thinking creates this life of short-term projects spliced together. The splicing together creates sequences for which the concepts of development, maturation, career, or progress could not be meaningfully applied. Something new to this generation, he says. A life so fragmented stimulates lateral rather than vertical orientations. I think a sociologist, that's a powerful observation. When I'm in my job and I'm not rightly fitted in my job and I'm constantly looking, where's the next connection? Where's the next best place for me to fit in? Where's the next promotion? Where's the next thing, right? It's all vertical or all horizontal. I'm always looking for the next thing. It's a bit frenetic, isn't it? That's life. But Bauman says, you know what the problem is? That constant sort of frenetic movement to the next thing, that the next sexy is really over there, never allows us to root in and say, all right, how am I going to get on a path, a trajectory, a direction that can build one step upon another? And as a result, he says, when we're constantly in this zone, we never can connect to this zone. I think it's a profound observation. What's the translation? Well, I think the translation is life in the American context isn't very coherent. People don't know whether they're coming or going. We're going to talk about this the next several weeks. People live culturally hypnotized. They're on autopilot. We get up in the morning, we do what we always do, we brush our teeth, eat the same thing for breakfast, we take the same route to work, we go ahead, we punch in, we punch out, we go home, we do the kid thing, then we collapse into bed, next morning, repeat. Repeat. So I think the American story is one that creates goal tension. But unfortunately, it's a goal that's largely unattainable, right? The great American story. It's interesting, over the last 10 years or so, there's been all sorts of articles, in fact, a couple full-scale books, written on cashing in the American dream for the European dream. Seriously. Go search Jeremy Rifkin, European Dream. Wrote a whole volume on it. And that the American way right now is we want to cash out our chips for the big home in the suburbs, and we want to go get a log cabin in Colorado and drink out of the stream. And tons of people are doing it. We want the European dream because, you know what, if you've ever been to Europe, you go to Europe, you sit down in Italy, you sit down in France, and you know what? They sit down at 5 or 6 o'clock for a meal on Wednesday night, not just Friday night, on Wednesday night, and they get up from the meal table at 10 or 11. Nice big spread of food, nice bottles of wine, and we're all sitting around doing family, community, connecting, European dream. And people are like, gosh, don't we say this a lot? We just would like to have a family meal once a week. Little league here, soccer there, ballet lessons there. Right? I think the challenge is that we've created a narrative tension for people, but it's not a tension they resonate with, so as a result, they jump into the American dream tension. And what they find out is they can't achieve that either. Right? That's the problem. Because there's never enough. There's always more to get. There's always a better car, a bigger house, a better title, a better office. And And so we never quite arrive. So what I want to do is I want us to get at, in the garden, I mean, this is the Genesis 1 narrative, right? I want us to go back to this. Solomon said, God set eternity in the hearts of men, hearts of humanity. God has made you and I imago Dei, made in the image of God. You have the image of God. Your neighbor has the image of God in them. All the people on the planet walking around have the image of God in them. Hindus, Buddhists, non-believers of any sort. All of them. All of us. That's the core piece. We're all the same in that regard. As a result, I think there are some core yearnings in that eternity, that imago Dei that's in you and your neighbor and your friend and your the person that you work out with and the people you know that are far from God. I think there's some core yearnings. So what I want to do is, and I think we see these in the garden, so what I want to do is I want to give you maybe a way, a little bit of a tool to work on this. The stem word cult in Latin means care. Don't think David Koresh cult, okay? All right? But in Latin, cultus, like when we talk about Israel's sacrificial system, it's called the sacrificial cultus. It's the thing that connects Israel to God. It's their care for God. Okay? So there's cultus, connection to God. That's going on in the Garden of Eden. There's cultivate. That is connection to dirt. Cultivate, Adam and Eve, the garden. You are connected to the dirt. Many of you maybe know this, but some of you maybe don't. Adam, his very name, is dirt. Did you know that? Dirt in Hebrew, the Hebrew that God took the dust of the earth and breathed into it the breath of life. God took the dust, the dirt of the earth is Adamah. And out of Adamah came Adam. Adam's dirt. Hello, dirt. Welcome, dirt, to the scene. Dirt, meet your wife, Eve. There it is. So he says, hey, you're going to have an intimate connection to dirt, cultivate, and also you're going to have a connection. It's not good that you're alone. You're going to have a wife. You're going to be in community, and that's culture. Our relationships, the sum total of our relationships to each other and to the artifacts of this world. That's culture. That's by definition what culture is. So cultus, connection to God, that's faith. Cultivate, that's connection to the dirt. God said, hey, work the garden, produce, let it develop fruit and vegetables for you. Do it. There's a sense of purpose. There's a sense of hope that I have some molding, shaping characteristic on the planet. Ability. And then there's culture. This drive for unconditional love. Now you can see how these all fit faith, hope, love, right? I mean, you see where this is going. But I want you to see, I think that you and I and our neighbors have these three big pieces as part of the very substance of their heart. Believe, this is these three pieces. I really believe I'm here for something bigger than myself. Most people believe that. They're not sure what it is, but they believe it. I'm here to make a dent in the world. I'm here to leave a mark. I'm here to make a contribution. I'm here to help somebody. I'm here, but it's bigger than just my life. The average person's default setting is that. Would you agree? It's just reflexive. I don't have to amass amount of evidence to prove that to Christine. It's just deep down inside us, we know we're here for something more. Now, I want you to think about this in terms of traditional evangelism. I don't have to persuade anybody of that. When they start talking about, you know what, I wonder what my life's meaning is, we're hovering over God's stuff, I think. We're hovering over eternity in the hearts of humanity. The second thing, the quest to become. Quest to believe is the first one. The quest to become. I can become something more tomorrow. That's hope. That's the cultivate piece. There's a typo there. That's the cultivate piece. I really believe that as I get up today, I can actually help mold and shape and contribute to this world in some productive way that will make it better. In fact, I have a hope, don't you, that each day will get a little bit better. Right? I mean, we really believe that. In fact, you know this. Loss of hope that leads to depression. Depression unchecked becomes clinical, and that's where we end up with suicides. The total loss of number 2 here, the quest to become, is suicidal. That's in the heart. Nobody, this is how you could argue easily. Nobody could go up and convince Danny, listen, I just want you to know tomorrow's definitely going to get worse. I mean, in every day thereafter, Danny, a little bit more worse. And a little bit more worse. And we go, what? That doesn't even reflexively hit us as right. We go, no. No. Not if I have anything to say about it, right? No. Tomorrow can get, part of who I am is I'm going to help tomorrow be better. Right? I think it's built into our hearts. God has set eternity in the hearts of humanity. I think it's built right into who we are. Or we'd have more suicides. This third quest, the quest to belong, there is an assumption, a default setting that says, I deserve to be unconditionally loved. Right? It's a default setting. We just say, hey, just love me for who I am. Don't we say stuff like this all the time? The assumption is, hey, I shouldn't have to earn your love. If I have to earn your love, it's not love. It's a default setting. I think it's a default setting, deep down in the hearts of who we are, of how God's wired us up, that there is a craving and an expectation that unconditional love ought to just happen. That's the culture piece, and that is unconditional love. Now, what's interesting, I think, is I think the all-American dream narrative creates this sort of narrative tension and will keep most people going for a lifetime. And it's largely because the narrative tension of acquisition and making a name for themselves and those sorts of things are never fully satisfied. And I think it's because we have a definite drive by these 3 core yearnings. And the American dream gives us 3 very nicely coy, artificial versions of these 3. So, try this out. Here's the infected version of the 3 core yearnings. I believe I'm here for something bigger than myself, but here's the infected American dream version. I define myself not as God says, but as culture claims I should be. Striving's my dominant disposition, though I'm never satisfied. Now, God's put within your heart that you're here to do something bigger than yourself. And so, you know what? I don't know how to connect with God in it. So, you know what? I'm going to make a dent in my business. I'm going to make a dent in the office. I'm going to make a dent with the nameplate on my door. I'm going to make a dent by driving around the right car. There's superficial versions of this and there's slightly more reflected versions of it, but they're both unsatisfying. You never can quite get there because I don't define myself as God says. I define myself by the way the culture says, and that's shifting. That's a moving target. Right? It's one day certain shampoo, it's the next day I need whiter teeth. It's not right. I mean, it just goes on and on. Second infected version, I can become something more tomorrow. That's the hope. The infected version is, I really can't impact a thing. I'm helpless to make a difference and resign myself to my fate. Resignation's the dominant emotion. You know anybody like this? I know lots of folks like this. You know what? I've been in an uphill churn. I'm on an uphill battle. I never get ahead. It's a constant up swim. You know what? I do what I do. I just, you know what? And these are people you need to be careful with, right? I mean, lack of hope leads to depression. Depression unchecked. Ooh, not good. But this is a common feeling within our culture. I don't have to amass any evidence to prove this to folks. People that are experiencing a lack of hope, we can go, well, why should you have hope? Don't you think tomorrow should just get worse and worse? No, absolutely not. I believe tomorrow should get better. Why do you believe that? Tell me a little bit more. Why do you believe tomorrow should get better? See, I think we're hovering over God's stuff there. I think the reason why you think tomorrow can get better is because God put it there. I think it's built in. So when we're hovering over hope, we're hovering over God's stuff. These three remain: faith, hope, and love. The greatest is love. I think we're hovering over God's stuff, man. Every time somebody expresses hope, I want to say, well, why are you hopeful? Why are you hopeful? Where does it come from? Third thing, I believe that I should be able to have unconditional love and acceptance. The infected version, how many of you know this one? I'm unworthy. I'll never really connect deeply with anyone. I'll protect myself and keep people at arm's length. Fear is my dominant emotion. I'm not going to let anybody in. Right? I think these three things sit at the very core of how we've been made, and the American dream story has sort of hijacked them. And I think anytime we are hovering over my life ought to amount to anything, we ought to say, really? Why do you think that? Where'd that come from? Who told you that? You learned that in school? Where did you get the idea your life? Why isn't your life absolutely, totally, 100% insignificant as a little speck on another littler speck of dust in a huge, massive solar system and universe? Well, why do you think your life should amount to anything? I think it's God stuff. I think God put it in our hearts. So what do these three core yearnings look like if they're done, I think, the way God's designed them to be done? I'm here for something bigger than myself, and in Christ, I discover my story and my journey and my contribution. Right? We looked last week. I am His workmanship. I'm created in Christ Jesus to do good works He's prepared in advance for us to do. I've got a story. He's unpacking and uncovering that story and trying to connect my story up with things He wants me to become and accomplish. Both. It's a major adjustment to the American dream version. I can become something more tomorrow. I really believe tomorrow can get better. Well, Christ in me is the hope of glory, so I can help shape my tomorrow and bring hope to the tomorrow of others. I've actually got something more than just a fleeting possibility. Something a little bit more stable. Something a little bit more substantive, right? I should have unconditional love and acceptance. Well, since God is love and Christ is in me, I am loved and can lavishly love without reciprocity. Now, that's easier said than done. But I want you to see, gang, that, in our Google world, in our world where truth has become very privatized, we can beat people over the head with the Bible all day long. And nobody cares. Nobody cares. I gave you guys the statistics the first couple of weeks we started into this series. The average 26-year-old out there far from God, or 38-year-old out there far from God, evidence isn't persuasive to them. But brokenness is. Shame is. Because that's personal. My lack of hope is. My lack of ability to experience love is. Those are all very existential, real realities. And Jesus came and died for all of it. All of it. Not one piece of it, all of it. So this morning, what I want us to do is maybe walk out of here this morning thinking about where are parts of who I am maybe slightly infected or hijacked by the American dream? Where do I need to go ahead and let go and recalibrate? But also, and I think this is really important, but also, I think it's this understanding or these sorts of understandings that will help us say, how am I going to connect with my friends that are far from God? I can tell them to read the Bible. I can tell them all sorts of stuff. But you know what? These are the realities they face day in and day out. Is my life going to matter? Can I connect to anybody? Can I really be honest and naked about who I really, really am? Because it's not very pretty. Is there anybody I really can trust with that? Do I really have any hope that next week will be better than this week because the last 15 weeks or 3 years of weeks have been terrible? Those are the realities people are facing. They don't care about amount of evidence that Jesus was the Son of God. That's not on their orbit. It's not on their map yet. It's not on their radar. Father, this morning we come and we recognize that you have asked us to be deeply in touch with our own hearts, to recognize that mining our story in this Google culture, the search, means us getting in touch with these deep core yearnings. Deep core yearnings that I not only have, but my friends have, everybody around me has. Father, would you help us each get more deeply in touch with our own stories so we can understand and see the spikes of interest that pop around us where we could have opportunities for spiritual conversations with people that don't know you yet. But that because you have already set eternity in their hearts, an eternity that longs for love and deep connection with other humans, in a deep sense that their life matters for something substantial. Give us the opportunities, Father, to enter into those conversations. In Jesus' name, amen.
I look up to the sky and say, you're beautiful. Oh,
May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be yours this day as you continue to mind your story and watch for the stories of others to emerge. Amen.